The late shift was the quietest, and Officer Dan Riggs liked it that way. The streets of Fairview were mostly empty after 10 p.m., just the way he preferred. Less noise, less nonsense. He'd been on the force for 19 years, long enough to know the rhythm of the town, long enough to think he knew just about everything worth knowing. He sat in his black and white cruiser, the engine a low rumble, in the parking lot of a closed-down hardware store. It was a good spot. He could see the traffic light on the corner of Main and Maple, watching the cars come and go. He wasn't really looking for anything serious. A broken taillight, maybe a speeder, something to pass the time. That's when he saw the car dot. It was a Honda Civic, a few years old but clean. It came to a full stop at the red light. Nothing wrong with that. But Riggs's eyes, trained over 2 decades, went straight to the front. The passenger side headlight was dark. A single headlight out. He felt a familiar, mild irritation. People were so careless. Let their cars fall apart. Probably didn't even know it was busted dot. The light turned green. As the Honda passed under the street lamp, the interior lit up for a second. The driver was a young woman, black. She had her hair in those braids that went down to her shoulders. She was nodding her head slightly, like she was listening to music. Something about the simple, normal side of her, just driving home, rubbed him the wrong way tonight. It felt comfortable. Too comfortable. In his mind, that carelessness about the headlight connected to something else. A story he told himself about people who didn't take things seriously. He didn't decide to pull her over. His hand just moved, flicking on the red and blue lights before he'd fully formed the thought. It was routine. A reason to talk to her, to check things out, to remind someone that the rules were the rules dot in the Honda. The young woman's name was Maya. She was 22, and she was tired. She'd just spent the last 3 hours at her desk, finishing up a logo design for a client. Her eyes were strained from staring at the screen, and all she wanted was her bed. She saw the dark headlight reflection in the store windows. She passed and sighed. She knew about it. The part had been weirdly hard to find for her model, but it was finally ordered. It was coming in 2 days. She'd made a mental note to drive extra carefully until then. When the police lights flashed behind her, her stomach did a little flip. Not fear, exactly. More like a heavy dread. An inconvenience that was about to turn into a whole thing. She signaled carefully and pulled into the bright, white-lit bay of an all-night gas station. It was a public, well-lit place. A good choice. She put the car in park, turned down the music, and rolled down her window. She placed her hands on top of the steering wheel, where they could be seen. She watched in the side mirror as the officer's door opened, and he stepped out. He was a big man, broad in the shoulders, his uniform crisp. His walk was slow, deliberate. He took his time coming up to her window, his heavy flashlight in his hand. Riggs leaned down, his face appearing in her window. He didn't say good evening. He shone his flashlight first into her back seat, a quick sweep, then let the beam land on her face, making her blink. "You know you're driving with a busted headlight?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was hard. It was an accusation, not a question. Maya kept her voice polite and level. "Yes, officer. I know. I'm sorry about that. The part is on order. It's coming this week." He didn't acknowledge her explanation. The flashlight beam moved to the inside of her car, over her seats, her dash. License and registration. She moved slowly, telling him what she was doing. "My registration is in the glove compartment. Is it okay if I get it?" He just nodded, his eyes watching her hands. She fumbled a little, her fingers feeling thick with nerves. She found the little paper card and her driver's license, handed them both to him. His fingers brushed hers as he took them, and he pulled his hand back a bit, like he'd touched something dirty. He looked at her license for a long time, then at her, then back at the license. You live over on Cedar Springs? That was a part of town with nicer apartments, newer buildings. Yes, sir, Maya said. Long way from home tonight, he said, his tone implying something. I was working late. At my office. On the south side. She kept her answers short, factual. He grunted, a sound that meant nothing. He walked slowly back to his cruiser, her documents in his hand. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her heart was beating fast. This felt wrong. It felt like more than a headlight. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke. It was like he was looking for something, waiting for her to make a wrong move. In the cruiser, Riggs tapped her information into the computer. Clean record. Not even a parking ticket. He felt a twinge of disappointment, which annoyed him further. Why should he be disappointed she was clean? He shook his head. It was the attitude. She had an attitude. Sitting there all calm, explaining about her order. Like the rules didn't apply until her special part came in. People like her always had an excuse. He decided he wouldn't just give a warning. He'd do a full vehicle check. Make sure everything else was in order. If she was so smart, she could stand outside in the cool night air for a bit. He'd take his time. He walked back to her car, his boots crunching on the gravel of the gas station. Maya saw his face and knew the tone had changed. It was colder. Step out of the car, please, he said. The dread in Maya's stomach turned to a cold stone. Step out? Why, officer? Is everything okay? I need to conduct a vehicle inspection. Now, out of the car. His voice left no room for question. This was wrong. She knew it. But what could she do? Argue? That would make it worse. With hands that trembled slightly, she undid her seatbelt and opened the door. The night air was chilly. She stood by her car door, hugging her arms around herself. Riggs began his inspection. He made a show of it. He checked her windshield for cracks. He looked at her tires, making a point of kneeling down. He had her pop the hood, and he peered inside with his flashlight, though he knew nothing about engines. It was all theater. A performance of power. Then he came to the front of the car. He stood in front of the working driver's side headlight. He shone his light directly on it. He reached out and tapped the glass lens with the metal barrel of his flashlight. Tap, tap. He looked over at her. She was watching him, her face a mask of confusion and growing fear. This one's bad, too, he stated. His voice was flat. Final. Maya was stunned. What? No, it's not. That one works perfectly. It was just the other one. He didn't let her finish. A strange, cold calm settled over him. This was the lesson. This was making the point. The law wasn't about her schedule, her excuses. He was the law. He raised the heavy steel flashlight high in the air. For a split second, Maya saw it silhouetted against the bright gas station lights. Her mind couldn't process what was happening. He brought it down with a sharp, violent crunch. The sound was huge in the quiet night. Plastic splintered. Glass shattered and tinkled as it rained down on the concrete. The bright beam of the working headlight died instantly, leaving a jagged, dark hole. Riggs lowered the flashlight. He looked at the destruction, then at Maya's horrified face. A mean, satisfied smirk touched his lips. Now, he said, his voice dripping with a fake, cruel helpfulness. Now they match. He stood there, waiting for her reaction, waiting for the tears, the anger, the protest he could then use against her. He had taken her problem and made it his solution. He felt, in that moment, completely in control. Maya didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the shattered remains of her headlight, then at the man who had done it. The cold stone in her stomach was now a burning coal. But her mind, the part that designed logos and solved problems, clicked into action. Her phone was in her jacket pocket, and her jacket was hanging in her hand. The pocket was facing toward him. Her thumb found the side button. Pressed it once. Pressed it again. She was recording. The world seemed to freeze for a second after the crunch of plastic and glass. Maya just stared at the dark, jagged hole where her headlight used to be. The sound was still echoing in her ears. She could smell the sharp, clean scent of the night air, mixing with the faint odor of gasoline from the pumps. Officer Riggs stood there, the heavy flashlight hanging loosely at his side now. He looked from the broken light to her face, waiting. He expected something. Tears, maybe. Or shouting. He was ready for that. He had dealt with shouters before. It gave him a reason to get louder, to take control completely. But Maya didn't make a sound. Her face was still, her eyes wide. Inside, her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she thought he might hear it. A hot wave of pure disbelief washed over her, followed by a colder, sharper one of fear. This wasn't a ticket. This wasn't a warning. This was something else. This man had just broken her property, right in front of her, for no reason at all. And he was smiling about it. The smirk on his face was the worst part. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a mean, satisfied twist of his lips. It said, "Look what I can do." And what are you going to do about it? Her mind, which had felt slow and thick with tiredness just minutes ago, was now screaming, crystal clear. Every story she'd ever heard, every warning from her parents, every news article flashed behind her eyes. Asterisk, be calm. Be polite. Don't give them a reason. Asterisk, but he had all the reasons. He was making them up as he went along. Her right hand, holding her jacket, felt the weight of her phone in the pocket. It was turned sideways, the microphone at the top pointing right at him. She had pressed the button blindly, twice. She prayed it had worked. She prayed it was recording. She couldn't look. She couldn't move. She just had to stand there and take it. You? She started, but her voice came out as a dry whisper. She cleared her throat, forcing strength into it. You broke my headlight. It wasn't a question. It was her trying to make the unbelievable thing real by saying it out loud. Riggs's smirk didn't fade. He shrugged one shoulder, a casual, mocking gesture. It was defective. A safety hazard. Now you'll have to get them both fixed. Consider it a lesson. His tone was that of a teacher scolding a child, but his eyes were cold and watchful. He took a step closer to her. Maya instinctively took a half step back, her shoulder pressing against the cool metal of her car door. The movement made his eyes narrow. Why are you moving? He asked, his voice dropping lower. I'm not done here. He was going to keep going. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The inspection, the breaking of the light, it wasn't the end. He was looking for the next thing, the next excuse. Panic started to curl at the edges of her vision. What was the next thing? Would he say she resisted? Would he find something in her car? She had to do something. But what? Arguing was a trap. Crying was a trap. Staying perfectly still felt like a trap, too. That's when a new sound cut through the tense silence. A car door shutting. Clunk. It wasn't loud, but in the quiet gas station, it sounded like a thunderclap. Both Maya and Riggs turned their heads at the same time. At the next pump over, an old blue pickup truck was parked. A man was standing beside it, a gas nozzle in his hand. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a short gray beard and wearing a dark jacket with a name patch she couldn't read. He was just standing there, staring. He had seen everything. The man's face was hard. His eyes were locked on Officer Riggs. He didn't look away. He slowly placed the gas nozzle back into the pump. Riggs straightened up. His posture changed. The casual, leaning menace was gone, replaced by a stiff alertness. "This is police business, sir," he called out, his voice trying to sound official and in charge. "Please attend to your vehicle." The man didn't move. He didn't get back in his truck. He didn't look away. He simply said, "I am attending to my vehicle." His voice was rough, like gravel. "I'm also attending to what I just saw." Maya felt a wild, desperate hope flare in her chest. A witness. There was a witness. Riggs took a step toward the man, putting himself between the man and Maya. "What you saw was an officer conducting a safety inspection. Now, I suggest you move along." The man didn't budge an inch. He shook his head slowly. "No, sir. What I saw was you take a flashlight and bust that girl's good headlight. For no cause. I got 2 working eyes." He pointed a thick finger at his own eyes. "I saw it." A flush of red started to creep up Officer Riggs's neck from under his collar. The smirk was completely gone now, replaced by a tight, angry line for a mouth. This wasn't part of the script. Witnesses were supposed to look away, mind their own business, drive off. They weren't supposed to stand there and call you out. "You are interfering with an official investigation," Riggs said, his voice rising. He took another step toward the pickup truck. "What investigation?" The man shot back, his voice rising to match. "The investigation of a working headlight? You just ended that investigation with your flashlight." He wasn't shouting, but his voice carried easily across the empty space between the pumps. The man then did something Maya would never forget. He slowly, deliberately, pulled his own phone from his pocket. He didn't point it at them. He just held it up, making sure Riggs could see it. "My cousin's a lawyer downtown," the man said, which might have been true, or might have been a bluff. It didn't matter. The meaning was clear. This isn't ending here. Everything changed in that instant. The power in the little gas station bay shifted. It was no longer just Officer Riggs and a scared young woman. It was now Officer Riggs, a scared young woman, and a stubborn witness with a phone and a loud voice. Riggs's head swiveled back to Maya. His eyes darted to her hands, to the jacket she was clutching. Did he suspect? His face was a storm of emotions: anger, panic, calculation. He was trying to figure out how to regain control, how to spin this. He opened his mouth, probably to order Maya back into her car, to tell the man to leave again. But he never got the chance. From the small, brightly lit convenience store, attached to the gas station, the door chimed and swung open. The clerk, a young guy with glasses who had been watching the whole scene from behind the bulletproof glass, stepped halfway out. He looked nervous, but he spoke up. Officer? Everything okay out here? I already called the station. Just to let them know there's a situation at the pump." His voice was shaky, but he got the words out. That was the final piece. The call had been made. It was official now. Other cops knew he was here, in a situation. Officer Riggs looked like a man who had just walked onto a stage, only to find the set collapsing around him. The confidence, the cruelty, the control, it all drained from his face, leading behind a pale, sweating mask of dread. His eyes flicked from the witness, to the clerk, to Maya's face, and then to the shattered headlight, the undeniable, stupid, physical evidence of what he had done. He didn't say another word to Maya. He didn't try to explain or threaten. He just turned on his heel, his boots making a sharp sound on the concrete, and walked quickly back to his cruiser. He almost stumbled on the curb. He yanked the driver's door open and slid inside, pulling the door shut with a solid thud. Maya, the witness, and the clerk all stood in silence, watching the black and white car. The engine didn't start. The lights stayed on. He was just sitting in there, hiding. The man with the pickup truck finally moved. He walked over to Maya. He kept a respectful distance, but his presence was solid, reassuring. "You all right?" he asked, his voice much gentler now. Maya tried to nod, but her whole body was trembling. The reaction she had been holding back was crashing over her in waves. "I think so," she managed to say. "Thank you. Thank you for—" "Didn't do nothing but have a set of eyes," he muttered, cutting her off. He looked at the cruiser with disgust. "Just stay right here. Don't you move. Someone else is going to show up now. You tell them everything. You hear me? Everything." Maya nodded again, gripping her phone in her pocket so tight her knuckles ached. She was still recording. She wasn't sure when she should stop. They didn't have to wait long. In less than 2 minutes, another set of police lights appeared, turning into the gas station. This cruiser was a different color, a darker gray. It pulled in smoothly and parked at an angle, not behind Maya's car, but in a way that blocked the exit lane. The door opened, and a police officer stepped out. A woman. She was older than Riggs, with short, graying hair and a calm, serious face. She took in the whole scene with one slow, sweeping glance. The broken headlight, Maya standing shaken by her car, the witness by his truck, the clerk in the doorway, and the other cruiser sitting silent and dark with Riggs inside it. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no surprise. It was just professional. She walked toward Maya first, her steps measured and quiet. She stopped a few feet away. "Ma'am," she said, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Sergeant Lynn. Are you injured?" The question was so simple, so normal, that it almost made Maya cry. After the surreal horror of the last few minutes, someone was asking a sane human question. "No," Maya whispered. Then she found a stronger voice. "No, I'm not hurt." Sergeant Lynn's eyes went to the shattered glass on the ground. "Can you tell me what happened here?" And before Maya could even open her mouth to answer, from the darkness of his cruiser, the driver's door finally opened. Officer Dan Riggs got out. He walked toward them, but his walk was different now. It was slow, heavy. The walk from his cruiser to where Sergeant Lynn stood was the longest 20 feet of Officer Riggs's life. The white lights of the gas station felt like spotlights, exposing him. His uniform, which usually felt like armor, now felt like a costume he'd been caught wearing. He could feel the eyes on him, the girl, the old man by the truck, the clerk. But Sergeant Lynn's eyes were the worst. They were calm, watchful, and completely unreadable. He stopped a few steps away, standing stiffly. "Sergeant," he said, his voice trying for normal, but coming out tight and strained. Sergeant Lynn gave him a slow nod. "Officer Riggs." She didn't ask him anything yet. She turned her attention back to Maya. "You were about to tell me what happened." Maya took a shaky breath. Her mind was racing. Where to start? The broken light? The way he spoke to her? The moment the flashlight went up? She glanced at Riggs, and seeing the nervous tension in his jaw, gave her a strange, cold courage. She pointed to the front of her car. "He broke my headlight," she said, the words simple and direct. Sergeant Lynn's gaze followed her finger to the wrecked plastic and glass. "I see that. How did it break?" "He hit it." Maya's voice grew stronger. "With his big flashlight. He said my other light was out, which it is. I told him the part was coming. Then he made me get out of the car. He checked everything. Then he came to this one, the good one, and he just smashed it." He said, "Now they match." As she spoke, Riggs couldn't stay silent. "That's not how it happened, Sarge," he blurted out. The words tumbled over each other. The headlight was faulty. The casing was cracked. It was a safety hazard. I was conducting a routine inspection for defective equipment. I tapped it with my light to demonstrate it was compromised, and the lens gave way. It was already broken. Even to his own ears, it sounded weak. It was the story he'd been frantically piecing together in the cruiser. But saying it out loud in the bright, quiet air, it felt like tissue paper. Sergeant Lynn didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Maya. Is that true? Was it already cracked? No, Maya said firmly, shaking her head. It was perfectly fine. I would have known. He raised the flashlight way up and smashed it down. It wasn't a tap. The witness by the pickup truck cleared his throat loudly. Sergeant Lynn turned her head toward him. Sir, did you see this? The man stepped forward, his boots scraping on the concrete. Yes, ma'am, I did. I was pumping gas right there. I saw the whole thing. That officer, he said, pointing a firm finger at Riggs. He had an attitude from the get-go. Didn't like something about her. He made her stand out here in the cold. Then he went through that whole song and dance, looking at tires under the hood. Then he walks up to that light, whacks it good and hard with that metal club he's carrying. It was a smash. No tap. And he said that smart remark, too. Now they match. I heard it clear as day. Riggs felt a hot sweat break out under his arms and on his back. He's mistaken, Riggs said, but his voice had lost its force. It was a whisper of protest. Sergeant Lynn finally turned her full attention to him. Her face was still neutral, but her eyes were like two dark lenses, focusing everything. Officer Riggs, explain to me the police procedure for testing the integrity of a headlight lens with your issued flashlight. The question was a trap, and they both knew it. There was no procedure. It wasn't a thing. It was an on-the-spot assessment, Sergeant. Officer discretion. The vehicle was unsafe. And is destroying city property, your flashlight, and private property, her vehicle, part of that discretion? Her tone was flat, asking for information, but the meaning was a blade. Riggs had no answer. He looked down at his boots. Sergeant Lynn looked back at Maya. Ma'am, is there anything else? Did he say anything else to you? Touch you? Maya's hand, still in her jacket pocket, tightened around her phone. This was the moment. She had almost forgotten it was recording, a secret witness in her poem. A part of her was screaming to just hand it over, to play it and end this right now. But another, more cautious part held her back. What if they took it? What if it disappeared? The man with the truck said someone else would come. He was right. This sergeant seemed different, but could she trust her? She made a split-second decision. She would tell part of the truth. He was rude from the start, Maya said, choosing her words carefully. He acted like I was lying about the headlight part. He made me feel like I'd done something wrong just by being here. And after he broke it, he looked at me like he was waiting for me to do something stupid so he could... I don't know. So he could do more. She didn't mention the phone. Not yet. Sergeant Lynn absorbed this. She looked at the clerk, still hovering in the doorway. You called it in? The clerk nodded quickly, pushing his glasses up his nose. Yeah, I saw him break the light. And the guy at the pump started yelling. I didn't know what was going to happen, so I called the non-emergency line. Told them an officer might need backup at the Shell on Main. Lynn gave a small, acknowledging nod. She then did something that seemed to suck all the air out of the space. She walked slowly over to Riggs's cruiser. She leaned in through the open driver's side window. When she straightened up, she was holding his heavy, long maglite flashlight in her gloved hand. She walked back into the light, holding it up. She looked at the thick metal barrel. Then she walked to the front of Maya's Honda. She didn't say a word. She crouched down, bringing the end of the flashlight close to the shattered remains of the headlight. She moved it slowly. Comparing Dot from where Maya stood, she could see it. The clear, dark smudge on the silver metal. A transfer mark. Grease from the headlight casing, or a tiny fleck of black paint from the car's frame. Evidence of contact. Sergeant Lynn stood up. She held the flashlight out toward Riggs, not handing it to him, just showing it to him. "This your issued light, officer?" "Yes, Sergeant." His voice was hollow. "And you used it to strike the vehicle?" "I used it to assess the vehicle's safety." He was sticking to the story, but it was crumbling with every second. Sergeant Lynn's lips pressed into a thin line. It was the first clear sign of her disapproval. She looked around the scene, the evidence, the multiple witnesses with matching stories, her officer's shaky, defensive account. The math was simple, and the answer was clear. She walked back to her own cruiser, opened the passenger door, and leaned in. She spoke into her radio, her voice too low for the others to hear. When she came back, her posture had changed. It was more formal, final. "Officer Riggs," she said, and her tone was no longer that of a colleague asking questions. It was the tone of a supervisor giving an order. "Please place your sidearm and your badge on the hood of my vehicle." The words hung in the air. For a second, Riggs didn't seem to understand them. He just stared. His face went from pale to a sickly gray. Everything, the job, the pension, his identity was in those two items. "Sergeant, you can't be serious." Over her word? Over this? He gestured weakly toward Maya in the car. "Over the evidence, the witness accounts, and your failure to provide a lawful justification for the destruction of property," Sergeant Lynn said, her voice even and impossibly calm. "This is now an internal investigation. You are on administrative leave, effective immediately. Your duty weapon and badge. Now." The finality in her voice broke him. The fight left his shoulders. His head dropped. With movements that were slow and clumsy, as if his fingers were numb, he unclipped the holster from his belt. He fumbled with the strap, finally removing the gun. He walked to the hood of the gray cruiser and laid it down carefully, as if it were a sleeping animal. Then he reached into his breast pocket and pulled out the worn leather wallet that held his badge and ID. He opened it, looked at the shiny metal star for a last, fleeting second, then closed it and placed it next to the gun. The two objects looked, small and insignificant, lying there on the cold metal. "You are to go home," Sergeant Lynn continued. "You will be contacted by Internal Affairs tomorrow. Do not speak to anyone about this incident. Do you understand?" Riggs nodded, unable to speak. He couldn't look at anyone. He turned and walked back to his cruiser. He got in, started the engine, and this time he drove away. The red and blue lights were off. He was just a man in a car now, leaving the mess he made behind. The silence he left behind was heavy, but different. The scary, charged tension was gone. It was replaced by a stunned, exhausted quiet. Sergeant Lynn let out a long, slow breath. She picked up the gun and badge, securing them. Then she turned to Maya. The professional mask softened, just a little. "I need to take your full statement," she said. "And his." She nodded to the witness. "It will take some time. Are you okay to do that now?" Maya looked at her destroyed headlight, then at the spot where Riggs's cruiser had been. The man who had done this was gone. He'd lost his gun and his badge in front of her eyes. The relief was so sudden and so immense it made her knees feel weak. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling again, but for a new reason. "Yes, I can do that." She finally let go of her phone in her pocket. She had recorded the whole thing. The smash, the voices, the arrival of Sergeant Lynn, the order to surrender the badge. All of it, she had proof. And for the first time that night, she felt like maybe, just maybe, Someone in a uniform was actually going to listen. The next morning, Officer Dan Riggs sat at his own kitchen table, still in the t-shirt and sweatpants he'd slept in. He hadn't slept. He'd just stared at the dark ceiling for hours, the sound of shattering glass playing on a loop in his head. The house was quiet, too quiet. His wife had left for work early after a tense, silent breakfast. She'd asked what happened, her voice tight with worry, but he'd just grunted, "Internal affairs thing." "It's nothing." He couldn't say the words. Saying them would make them real. He felt untethered. For 19 years, his life had a rhythm. The shift, the uniform, the radio chatter, the quiet authority that came with the badge. Now that was gone. He was just a man in a quiet house, waiting for a phone call that felt like a sentencing. When the phone finally rang, just after 10, he jumped. The number was from the station. His throat went dry. "Riggs," he answered, trying to sound normal. It was Lieutenant Harris from Internal Affairs, a man with a voice like dry paper. "Dan, you need to come in. Today, 1 p.m., conference room B." "What's this about, Lieutenant?" Riggs asked, even though he knew. "You know what it's about. The incident last night at the Shell station. Be here, and bring your union rep." The line went dead. The drive to the station felt alien. He was in his personal car, a plain sedan. He had to stop at red lights like everyone else. He didn't have a radio to listen to. He was just another citizen. When he walked in the back entrance, officers he'd known for years saw him, nodded awkwardly, and quickly looked away. The news was already spreading. The story of the Headlight, the sergeant, the suspension. It was a juicy piece of gossip, and he was the punchline. Conference room B was cold. Sitting across the stark table were Lieutenant Harris and a woman from the city's legal department. His union representative, a tired-looking older officer, sat beside him. Already smelling like this was a lost cause. They didn't yell. They didn't accuse. They just laid out facts, one after another, like stacking bricks to build a wall around him. First, the written statements. Sergeant Lynn's was clear, detailed, and damning. She described the shattered headlight, the transfer mark on the flashlight, the witness accounts, and Riggs's implausible and unsupported explanation. Then they showed him the statement from the gas station clerk and the one from the witness with the pickup truck. They all matched. They all said the same thing. He had smashed the light on purpose, with force, and made a cruel joke about it. Then the lieutenant slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of an email from the gas station's corporate office. They had provided the security camera footage from Pump 4. "We've reviewed it," Harris said quietly. "The angle is clear. It shows you raising your arm and bringing the flashlight down on the vehicle. The audio isn't great, but the visual is conclusive." Riggs felt the last bit of fight drain out of him. He'd hoped the camera was broken or pointed the wrong way. No such luck. Then the woman from the legal department said, opening a folder, "We began a review of our personnel file as per procedure. We found 3 prior citizen complaints that were concerning in light of this new incident." Riggs's head snapped up. "Those were dismissed. Unfounded. Unproven," the woman corrected him calmly. "One for unnecessary rudeness 2 years ago. One for a discourteous tone last year. And a more serious one 8 months ago from a young man alleging you slammed him on the hood of his car during a stop for a loud muffler. That one was a he said. No camera, no independent witness. It went nowhere." She paused, letting the words hang. Alone, they were minor. Together, with this, they show a pattern of conduct unbecoming an officer. Pattern of aggression, particularly toward younger citizens. His union rep shifted in his seat. "Dan, You need to start thinking about damage control. The city is looking at a major lawsuit. They're going to want this to go away clean." The meeting ended with more instructions. Stay off social media. Do not contact any witnesses. Remain on leave. As he walked out, the lieutenant stopped him at the door. "The chief is making a decision by the end of the week, Dan. I'm just giving it to you straight. It's not looking good. You should prepare yourself." 2 days later, the hammer fell. Not with a phone call, but with a registered letter and an email. He was officially terminated from the Fairview Police Department for egregious misuse of authority, destruction of private property, and conduct that brings the department into disrepute. The letter was cold, legal, and final, but it wasn't the end. The next week, a letter from the state's Law Enforcement Standards and Training Commission arrived. Because his termination was for a serious breach of ethics involving dishonesty and abuse, they were revoking his police certification permanently. He was not just fired from Fairview. He was barred from being a police officer anywhere in the state. Ever again, the job was his life. It was his identity. Officer Riggs. Without it, he was nobody. He was a 44-year-old man with a high school diploma and 19 years of experience in a job he could no longer do. The walls of his life began to close in. His wife tried to be supportive, but the strain was immense. The story had hit the local news. Fairview officer fired after allegedly vandalizing car during stop. Someone had leaked the basic details. Nobody said his name on TV, but everyone in town knew. His neighbors didn't wave anymore. Old friends from the department stopped returning his texts. The final, crushing blow came from the district attorney's office. They announced they were reviewing the case for potential criminal charges, misdemeanor vandalism, and possibly official misconduct. They weren't promising to charge him, but the fact they were looking into it meant he needed a lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, and those cost money. A lot of money. One evening, his wife sat him down at that same kitchen table. Her eyes were red. "Dan," she said, her voice quiet, "my brother called. He can get you a job at his warehouse. Loading trucks." He stared at her. Loading trucks. After 19 years in uniform? The humiliation was a physical pain in his chest. She went on, her words coming out in a rushed, pained whisper. "But we have to talk about the lawyer. We have to mortgage the house. And I can't do this." The staring. The whispers. "My friends ask me what happened. What do I tell them?" A week later, she left. She took her things and went to stay with her sister. She said she needed space. He knew she wasn't coming back. Dan Riggs was now utterly alone in the quiet house. He sat in the dark living room, the glow from the silent television flickering on his face. He replayed that night over and over. The girl's calm face, the feel of the flashlight in his hand, the stupid, rising anger he'd felt, the need to put her in her place, to show her who was in charge. He thought about the 5 minutes. That was all it had been. 5 minutes from the moment he decided to swing the flashlight to the moment Sergeant Lynn's cruiser pulled in. 5 minutes of petty, stupid, cruel power. In those 5 minutes, he had thrown away everything. His career, his reputation, his marriage, his future. All for the satisfaction of breaking a piece of plastic and glass on a car belonging to a stranger. He had thought he was teaching her a lesson. But the only lesson learned was his own, and it was a devastating one, that the authority he held was not a part of him, but a loan from the people he served. And in one act of pure malice, they had called that loan due, taking back everything they had given him, leaving him with nothing but the echoing silence of his own bad choices. For Maya, the days after the gas station felt like walking through a strange, slow-moving dream. The shock of that night was a cold stone in her stomach that wouldn't go away. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, hearing the crunch of glass. She'd see the officer's smirk in her mind when she closed her eyes, but she wasn't alone. Her family gathered around her. Her parents, who lived an hour away, came and stayed for a week. They didn't push her to talk. They just cooked food and filled the quiet spaces in her apartment. Her older sister, a paralegal, became her unofficial advisor. "Write everything down," she told her. "Every single detail you remember right now." So Maya did. She filled pages of a notebook with times, words, feelings. She knew she had the recording on her phone. She'd listened to it once, her hands shaking as she heard his voice. The smash, the sergeant's arrival. It was real. She'd backed it up in 3 different places. It was her truth, locked in a digital file. A week after the incident, a letter arrived from the Fairview Police Department. It was formal, on official letterhead. It stated that Officer Dan Riggs had been terminated following an internal investigation. It thanked her for her cooperation and provided a case number. It felt both satisfying and empty. One man was gone, but the system that let him wear a badge for so long was still there. Then a lawyer reached out. Not just any lawyer. A civil rights attorney who had heard about the case through the grapevine. He was a tall, serious man with a calm demeanor. He asked to meet her at a coffee shop, not his fancy office. "I'm not here to push you into anything," he said, stirring his tea. "But what happened to you was wrong. It was an abuse of power. The city knows it. They fired him because they know they have zero defense." He explained what a federal civil rights lawsuit could mean. It wasn't just about money for a broken headlight. It was about holding the city accountable for training, or failing to train, its officers. It was about sending a message that this behavior had a severe cost. Maya was hesitant. She didn't want to be in a spotlight. She didn't want a long, drawn-out fight. "Think about it this way," the lawyer said gently. "The settlement money, if there is any, that's one thing. But we can also ask for something else. We can ask for policy changes, better camera reviews, different training protocols, and we can ask them to cover the costs for you to start something. A small fund, maybe, to help other people who get wrongfully ticketed or harassed, but can't afford a lawyer to fight it." That last part stuck with her. Turning this horrible thing into something that could help others. It felt like taking a piece of the power back. After talking it over with her family, she decided to move forward. The lawsuit was filed. It was in the news again, but this time with her lawyer's voice doing the talking, protecting her privacy. The city, as her lawyer predicted, wanted it to go away quickly. The security footage and the audio recording from her phone made a trial, a guaranteed loss for them. Within a few months, they settled. The financial part of the settlement was significant. It was enough to pay off her student loans, buy a reliable new car, and put a solid amount into savings. It was life-changing, and she was deeply grateful for the security it brought. But the other part of the settlement meant more to her. The city agreed to a third-party review of their traffic stop procedures, and they agreed to a one-time grant to establish the Fairview Traffic Justice Fund, a small nonprofit that would offer free legal guidance to residents contesting what they believed to be discriminatory or wrongful traffic citations. Maya was named as the founding donor. She used a small part of the money to get it started, renting a tiny office space and hiring a part-time law student to run it. She didn't run it herself. She had her own career as a designer, but she sat on the board. The first time they helped a single mother get an unfair ticket dismissed, Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt since before that night. The stone in her stomach finally began to dissolve. Her life moved on, but it was marked by what happened. She was more aware, more cautious. She got a dash cam for her new car. She was okay. She was more than okay. She had turned a moment of powerlessness into a position of quiet strength. Asterisk, 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 asterisk across town. The man who had been Officer Riggs was living in a different world. He took the loading dock job at his brother-in-law's warehouse. The work was backbreaking, monotonous, and humiliating. Men half his age worked alongside him, calling him old man and laughing when he struggled with the heavier boxes. His body ached in ways it never had before. His hands, which used to hold a badge and a gun, were now rough and calloused, stained with packing tape and dust. The criminal investigation by the district attorney eventually ended without charges. They said that while his conduct was deplorable, proving a criminal intent for the broken headlight was tricky, and with him already fired and decertified, the public interest was served. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt empty. He was not even worth prosecuting. He lived alone in the house he could no longer afford. He was waiting for the foreclosure notice, for the bank to take back the keys. The lawyer's bills had eaten through everything else. He spoke to his wife only through her attorney. The divorce papers were on his kitchen table, next to a pile of unopened bills. One afternoon, after a brutal shift, he stopped at a cheap diner for coffee. He sat at the counter, his shoulders slumped. The television above the fry cook was on the local news. A reporter was standing in front of a small storefront with a new sign. Fairview Traffic Justice Fund, free consultations. The reporter talked about the notorious Headlight incident that had inspired the fund. They didn't say his name, but everyone in the diner knew. He saw a brief, smiling photo of Maya, the girl from the gas station. She looked confident, put together. She was talking about community and accountability. Then the news shifted to a sports story. No one in the diner paid any attention. No one looked at him. He was just another tired, beaten-down man drinking bad coffee. He thought about the 5 minutes. That's what it kept coming back to. 5 minutes of his life. 5 minutes where he let the worst part of himself take the wheel. 5 minutes where he thought his badge was a weapon to hurt, not a tool to serve. In those 5 minutes, he had chosen to be a bully instead of a public servant. He had believed his own story for so long that he was the one keeping order, that people didn't respect the rules. But that night, he finally saw the truth. The rules he cared about were just an excuse. The real thrill was in the power, in making someone smaller so he could feel bigger. And for that, he had paid the ultimate price. Not a fine, not a suspension. He had paid with his entire life. His career, his marriage, his home, his reputation. All gone. He was a ghost in his own town, a cautionary tale people whispered about. He finished his coffee, left $1 on the counter, and walked out into the gray afternoon. He had nowhere to go but the empty house, and then back to the warehouse in the morning. His future was a straight, unchanging line of hard labor and solitude. He had shattered a headlight to prove a point. And in doing so, he had shattered his own world into 1,000,000 pieces, leaving himself with nothing but the sharp, endless regret of those 5 minutes, and the silence that now filled every hour of his days. The girl had moved on, turning her pain into purpose. He was stuck forever in the moment of his own making, a prisoner of the man he had chosen to be.